To the City Council work session on Tuesday, November 21st, 2017. We will move through the roll call, please, Vanessa.
Councilmember Chapados?
Here.
Councilwoman Gussie? Here. Councilmember Manfredi?
Here.
Councilmember Wade?
Here.
Vice Mayor Brown? Councilmember Smith is on the phone with us. Mayor Price?
Here.
Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. I know Vice Mayor is attending his wife tonight. She has some stuff that she's dealing with. And then, like you said, Councilmember Smith is on the phone. We are having some technical difficulties, so you may not hear her audio voice. She is asking questions, watching the live feed and asking questions via phone to Vanessa. So with that, we'll move to item 3.1, which is the Mayor City Council to review items on the regular City Council agenda. Councilmember Smith had a question regarding item 9.1, and the question that was asked is on 9.1, why is this coming from the contingency? Was it not part of the budget? And this was the purchasing manager approved First Amendment to the contract with the Policy Development Group from Lobbyist Services.
Honorable Mayor, council members, we are looking into this. We believe that the funding is coming from the vacant crew leader position that's not going to be filled this year, as from both the salaries and benefits. It should have been budgeted. It was just an oversight, but we think that we have a means of funding it without taking the money out of contingency. But our finance director is confirming that at this time.
Okay. Okay, thank you. If we get follow-up questions there, we'll pass them along. Council, any other questions on this agenda at this time? Yes, Councilmember Wade.
Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, I'm having technical difficulties here as well. I had a question in reference to item number 9.3, specifically as it relates to, doggone it,
The construction substation?
Yeah, the substation, but there was an item in there that we were discussed that was a part of the amendment to improve the road conditions there, or improve the type of material that was used for the road. And I was curious, it stated that that was going to be, that should have been done in the previous offer or in the previous proposal, and why was that not part of that, and why is it considered important now?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Through the mayor, Councilman Wade, you're referring to the back parking lot and the back driveway.
Yes, sir.
Essentially, it's a back driveway. It's a fairly common practice in when we're building is to eliminate scope to make budget. There's things that are necessary and things that are nice, and then add them back in as we have money. The back driveway, was, in fact, actually the gates in general, and the wall around the back parking lot, the back driveway were all things that were eliminated during the original project. And as the police department's gotten grants and the project has closed out and there's money left over, because it was Ross Renner as the CIP manager, he did a really good job managing it. They are able to fund those things, so they're adding them back in. That's all.
Okay.
You don't actually have to have a back driveway, but the police want one, so.
Okay.
And it was designed in the first place.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that, Bill. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Council, any other questions on this agenda at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on then. That'll take us to item 3.2. The Mayor and City Council shall hear reports on meetings and/or conferences attended by the council. At this time, council, time is yours. Anyone wish to report? Councilmember Chapados, did you have something?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to say that on the 11th, I was part of several thousand people that attended our first Veterans Day Parade, and I wanted to give a special thank you to Gabby Potter and her committee for putting that on, and also to all of our folks, including Councilmember Wade and Jen Brown, who were part of the parade, so thank you for doing that.
Councilmember Gussie.
Councilwoman Gussie as well was in there. Also on the 15th, I attended the quarterly MAP event. If any of you are still looking for ways to get involved and give back to the community, MAP, which is the Maricopa Advocate Program, is a great way to get involved and learn a lot of stuff about our city and economic development projects and how we do things here. On the 18th, I also went out and visited Mac Family Farm Day out at the Ag Center. They had a lot of great exhibits. The worst part, I think, was walking from the parking lot to the exhibits because it was all dirt and dust, and anybody that drove through there just, you know, churned up the dust, but it was a great event. And I also participated by giving back to the local economy as part of the studio crawl. So it was various artists that had stuff available in their homes. You got to go and actually talk to them in detail about how they did their craft, how they come up with the different ideas for things, and I got most of my Christmas shopping done, so it was a great day. So that's all for me, thanks.
Thank you very much. Yes. Councilwoman Gussie, and then Councilmember Wade.
I had the opportunity, along with the Vice Mayor, to attend the National League of Cities, and it was a great conference. Gabby Gifford was there, and it was very emotional and very, it was a great conference, and she was our guest speaker for the first day of opening session. There was a couple of highlights for me. I got to sit in on the incubator space, the Smart Cities programs, the Veterans Tiny Homes program, Youth Council STEM programs, and also the two constituency groups, the Women in Municipal Government and the Hispanic elected local officials. So it was great. It was a good conference, and I'm sure the Vice Mayor received a lot of information from that conference also. It was great.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate it. Yes, Councilmember Wade.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to also state on the record how happy I was with the first annual Veterans Parade. I think it was outstanding. Councilwoman Gussie and the auxiliary from Post 133 did an excellent job of that. It was, Gabby was all over the place and taking care of business. So I equated actually walking in the parade with folks, I equated as a big community hug. That's how it felt to me personally as I was walking through. And so I say thank you to the community that was there and participated in that, because that's how good it felt. In reference to other items, I'll have to forego that because I didn't bring them up on my tab. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate it. Anyone else at this time? Okay, thank you. I'll gladly hear it from you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That'll take us to item 3.3. The Mayor and City Council shall hear a presentation from Siegel Waters, who will present their findings for the recently completed classification and compensation study. Kathleen?
Mayor and Council, I have Ruth Ann Elledge, who is the project manager for Siegel Waters on our class and comp study. She's here to present her report and findings and recommendations. At the end of her presentation, I'm going to come back up, talk a little bit more about the process, what our next steps will be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How are you this evening? Thank you for the opportunity to be here to go over this results and recommendations from our study that Siegel Waters has conducted for the city of Maricopa. I do want to begin by thanking Human Resources and all of the other staff that have helped with this project. It's been a very collaborative process, and without it, I feel like we wouldn't have this good of us. And I guess a collaborative interest and effort to come together to agree on how we're going to update the city's pay system to be more competitive with the market. This study was primarily focused on a market study to look at how the city compares to other entities, but there was a key deliverable of the study that also included a classification review. And we're going to talk about each one of these deliverables individually as we move through this presentation. And please feel free to ask questions at any time as we go through this slideshow. But part of this was to look at initially 25 job classifications that the city had identified early on for us to do kind of a more in-depth, deeper dive into looking at the jobs and the classifications and documenting the work. The process that we used has now been set up so that the city can continue to use those same tools and techniques to continue to provide job documentation, look at classification of positions, and update job descriptions. So we'll talk in a few moments about that process. The other key deliverable was the actual market survey, the market comparisons, the recommendations for changes to your pay system, and then of course the updated documentation for you and the final report that's been prepared. And in fact, this report is the one that you've received in your packet is a draft. This is an ongoing working document because as we have been presenting results, Human Resources has been meeting with employees and representatives and getting feedback, and we've been incorporating that feedback into our study recommendations after we've reviewed it. So it's been, like I said, a very collaborative process. Want to begin by talking a little bit about the job analysis phase of the project. This typically occurs early on because before you even get out into the market, you need to have a good understanding of all the jobs. And since we had been asked to look at these 25 job descriptions or job titles, we first began by gathering information from them. That included creating a customized job description questionnaire that employees could complete on their work. It was then reviewed by their supervisor and managers because solid documentation begins with the employee and includes that review and additional comments by supervisors and managers. Those come then to Siegel Waters. We look at those. We came back and actually included 7 job titles for additional interviews and follow-up conversations. And those occurred because our process was designed to look at what are key characteristics and differentiating factors between jobs. And that's important to be able to document those characteristics like differences in education experience requirements, the levels of responsibility a position has in giving oversight or direction to employees, or the types of interactions and decision-making involvement they have. So we spent quite a bit of time making sure that we had a spreadsheet that actually provided that documentation and is now set up along with the job questionnaire and can continue to be used as jobs are analyzed, reviewed, and we now have a job description format that these job descriptions have been written and can, again, be used for future job descriptions. So that was the class piece. As part of that, we did look at the exemption status for these 25 job titles, looking at the Fair Labor Standards Act requirements for eligibility for overtime or exemption from overtime. We had some recommendations for moving about 5 positions, I believe, into eligibility for overtime, and I think 1 position will then also be recommended for exemption from overtime. But in the most part, everything was well documented. The exemption statuses were appropriate, but these are ones that we're recommending for your consideration. We also designed what we call a titling protocol, so that as we looked at your job classifications and as the city continues to look at them, they can ensure consistency in how they use job titles. For example, what is a specialist? What is a technician? What is a lead position or a supervisor or manager? And some of our recommendations as we looked at the pay structure and the job classifications were to modify titles based on this titling protocol. So it provides you with some internal equity in the way jobs are described and titled within the city. So this was all part of our job analysis, job classification phase. We've turned that over to Human Resources, and the job descriptions have been written, and I think those are the discussions that they have had with employees, and I think they've gone quite well, actually. The market assessment phase of the project included going out to comparable employers and collecting data on jobs within the city of Maricopa. When you have a study, you typically identify jobs to conduct the market survey with and then apply that market data to the remainder of jobs that are not in that survey document. Oftentimes, a city will have jobs that are specific to that city. You're organized a little bit differently, you're structured a little bit differently. And so as we looked at all the job descriptions and the job documentation, we recommended 60 job titles out of, I think, 90 to 100 job titles that were included in the study for survey. The way we determined those 60 is we actually did a statistical analysis of all of your job titles to ensure that we were appropriately recommending all departments, all levels within career families, and across the city equally. And there was a statistical analysis that was done. And in those jobs, the 60 that represented, they all 11 city departments, and they were about 71% of all incumbents. So those jobs represented 71% of your workforce and 69% of all of your job titles. So we felt like that was a very strong representation of your workforce. The other piece that is included in the survey is identifying comparable employers, because this was a custom survey. We went out into the market and we asked these 11 employers to give us documentation. And these were reviewed, I think, and we selected based on 3 or 4 characteristics that we thought were important to consider when you're identifying who you're going to collect market data from. certainly who was close by, who you competed with in the labor pool, who was of similar size. And I think you're in the middle of this, in the middle of these cities or towns and cities. You're right kind of in the middle, so you have some that are larger and some that are smaller. And we felt that this group was a good, strong representation of the marketplace. Of these 11, 9 actually participated in the survey, or we were given data to Siegel Waters that we then did the survey work ourselves. So we have representation from all of these peer employees except for the town of Gilbert and Marana. Yes, ma'am.
Was there a particular reason why those two towns didn't participate? Did you get any feedback from them?
Typically, it was a workload issue. I know that Marana they were down in staff, and so they didn't have sufficient people like they felt like they could participate. We always offer the employers that participate results of the study as an incentive for them to participate in the survey. And I think that both Gilbert and Marana just were not able to complete the survey in the time frame that we were able to provide for them. Okay. Any other questions? So the market methodology was to collect, in addition to pay practices and pay policies, was to collect information on salary range, minimum, midpoints, and maximums. And one of the things that you're going to see here is as we have continued, and even after the documents that you've received in your packet, we have updated salary data, and you'll see that now as we've more or less begun to finalize the data based on all the feedback that we've received, that overall the city's pay ranges are lagging market at entry, midpoint, and maximum. And so I think that further reinforces the recommendations that we're giving you for the updated pay structure, because as we begin to finalize all this, we're finding that indeed the structures that were recommended are warranted and should be adopted to provide you with a good relationship to market. And we say that we're talking about a tolerance of plus or minus 5% of market average. And you can see that if you divide, you can cut up the market data by department, and you can see that many of the departments are lagging in the pay range minimum, midpoint, and maximum. And overall, you're at 94% at the minimum, 91 at midpoint, and 89 at maximum. So one of the things that's important to do is dig down even further to look at individual job titles, because as you're updating your pay structure, you're not only going to look at the design of the structure, but where jobs fit into that range of pay. And so as we began to look at individual positions, we were using range midpoint as our point of comparison. Best practice and compensation is to use the midpoint to target the range that that position should be in. So if you look at the midpoint of the market and then the midpoint of the proposed range, you're trying to match those up closely. We did use a tolerance of plus or minus 5% because it's hard to do it exact 100% for every job. And we found that if you look at all the 60 job titles, 21 of them were within that plus or minus 5% tolerance. We had another 35 that were below market, 2 that were above, and then we had 2 jobs that we didn't get sufficient data for. When you look at the pay policies and pay practices that we gathered, in general, your pay policies and practices were fairly similar to what the other employers were doing in terms of pay structure design, pay administration, and pay practices. Pay schedule designs were typical, using steps for your public safety, open ranges for your other employees, using performance-based pay, sometimes longevity for the sworn employees. Those are all approaches that we commonly found in the peer employers. So there weren't a lot of differences that we saw there that were recommendations for changes for the city of Maricopa. The only thing we did see is that many of the other peer employers do have a tuition reimbursement program, and that is something that you may want to consider in the future based on affordability and how you want to manage your overall benefits. So let's talk a little bit about the actual structures that we're recommending. Your current structures have 13 levels, and what we're recommending is 14 levels, so it's very similar. What we are recommending, though, is that you retain your current police and fire structures the way they are, because they're generally competitive. I think there is some discussion still occurring that there might be an interest in adding one step for one or two ranks within police and fire, but generally the ranges are competitive. Excuse me. You currently don't have a formalized pay structure. In other words, one that has a nomenclature that identifies each level. And so we are assigning a level or a nomenclature to each level. And then we're making sure that the ranges are competitive using the updated market data. The ranges are also being expanded, from the minimum to the maximum being expanded for each range from 38 to 44%. And that matches up with the average range spread that we found in the market. And it gives you a little more distance from the entry to the maximum and helps give employees some room for growth within their current range of pay. So the structures have been designed to be broadened a little bit, have generally the same number of levels. I think we've added one more level, but they are realigned more closely with the market so that the midpoints of the proposed ranges for the jobs are more closely matching the market data. We have included in here 4 new job titles just from the classification review, and 31 job titles that are generally like changing a title to a specialist or a coordinator or a supervisor. But generally, what we're not seeing is a very high cost for implementation of this study, because most employees are already in the range of pay that they're being proposed to be placed into, and so there's only a small number that are below entry of their proposed range. And so that is the cost that you're seeing here, along with some part-time employees, because we were making some recommendations for structural changes for your part-time employees. They currently have, I think, 12 levels in their step plan, and I think we're recommending that now go to about 6 levels, because you don't need that many levels for seasonal and temporary employees. So your costs are what I would consider minimal from my experience in a comp class study, and I think it's appropriate to consider this recommendation when it comes back to you after we finalize everything before sometime in mid to late December. So, do you have questions about the methodology, the approach, anything that I can help you
Council,
get more
questions?
clear?
Yes, let's start with Councilmember Wade, and then we'll go to Councilmember Chapados.
And maybe it was in the package, and maybe I wasn't paying attention. You had a description of all the pays and all the pay positions. Was that not in this deck here?
In the final report, there was a list of all the job titles that were in the survey and the definitions that were used. Is that what you're referring to, or is it something else?
No, it actually, what it actually looked like was a diagram of all the positions. And it listed, and the only reason I call it came to my attention is because I noticed that that there were a couple of director positions that were missing from that diagram.
Do you know what he's...
Councilman Wade and Mayor and Council, you're referring to a draft of what the new salary plan would look like that had the minimum, mid, and max and all the job classifications.
Right,
I did not include that as part of this presentation. That is something that we are still working on in terms of adapting the results from the market survey and incorporating it into the new structure. But I assure you, every classification is captured.
Okay, all right, because it looked like it was a couple of directors that were missing, and I didn't have it in front of me, so I can't say what it was. So, thank you.
They would not let me miss anyone.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
So, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I have a couple questions for you, and maybe more appropriate for HR, but one of the questions is, you said that there's some variables that have been coming to your attention, and I've seen, just from when I first downloaded the PowerPoint till tonight, numbers have changed. So what might some of those variables be, and will the final numbers be available to us by mid-December, or is this going to be something that will be ongoing?
Yeah, I do know, and I won't speak for Kathleen, but I do know, because she can elaborate further. But as she's been meeting with employees, there's been questions about matches to positions. There's been a question, about how jobs are in the hierarchy. And so as the feedback has been given to us, then we go back and look at it. And sometimes we say, well, okay, maybe that probably shouldn't be a match for that job, so let's remove that match from the market. So that's part of a normal process, because as we present information, it's very important that it gets vetted through this process of people reviewing it and giving feedback. And so that's the kind of thing that we're hearing. I think we're close to getting most of the feedback, and so we should be close to being able to send more finalized documents.
Councilwoman Chapados, Mayor and Council. We shared the preliminary report and proposed salary plan with staff starting last week, and all of them were advised that their feedback was important to us, and we're beginning to get that feedback. And as questions come up, we're looking at that, we're following up with the consultant, we're reviewing it, and so I do anticipate that there will be changes that would be reflected in the final salary plan that we would like to bring back to you that would incorporate the feedback from employees, directors, and clarification on any data points from the consultant.
Have you received any appeals to this point?
We have, yes, we have.
And will those be factored into the new data and the final numbers?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
My other question was, and in your experience, we're a brand-new city, and historically, we've asked staff to do kind of more above and beyond what normal established positions would require. I mean, we were running the city as we were creating the city. So how do we compare overall to some of the other cities and class and comp studies that you've done for a brand-new city with a very limited budget, which, is tight, bare bones type of thing? How do we compare with the class and comp study for our city and our particular situation?
Actually, I would say extremely well. Some of the studies that I've conducted recently, Avondale, Goodyear, some of the others, the implementation cost, which is what I think gives you a good sense of where they are, have been significantly higher than yours. So you've done a remarkable job, I think, of growing your organization. Yes, you've fallen some behind market, but you see that the cost for catching up is not significant, and therefore the classification hasn't changed that much. The titling has been updated, but you're only adding 4 new positions. So I think overall, the city and HR has done a very good job keeping up with the market within a limited budget.
Okay.
I have seen some quite a bit further behind market.
Okay. And this question probably is more applicable for Kathleen and HR as a whole. What are we going to do? What will we continue to do as a city to incentivize people because of some of the challenges that being in the city of Maricopa has for employees, as well as being in Pinal County? What are we doing to attract and keep good employees? What can we do above and beyond just class and comp studies? My other question has to do with feedback from the employees themselves. I mean, if you're given a chance to input on your job description and your list of tasks and duties, then that gets rolled into a statistical analysis and a comparison across the board. There may be some additional feedback that I know for myself would be interested in seeing from our individual employees' perspective, is that do they feel that they're being evaluated in their mind on a par with someone else that shares that job title or that class and comp position, based on what it says on paper that they do versus what they really do? So what's HR's plan to address those issues?
So Councilwoman Chapados, I see that as a 3-part question. So first part would be attracting and retaining. I think class and comp is a big piece of that, because we will have better optics, frankly, in terms of, as we post our positions, we post the full salary. People will see perhaps a higher top end, and hopefully that might intrigue them to be interested in coming. And I have heard from employees that having a higher top end will incent them to stay. So that's kind of the anecdotal feedback about that. Our benefits package is another critical piece that we offer, and doing a good job of communicating what that includes and what we offer, and we can always do better on that. I had hoped with the survey that we'd actually get some more creative ideas about some different ways that we can recognize and reward employees aside from the straightforward hourly rate approach. Unfortunately, no one is really leading the charge there, but that doesn't mean that I won't continue to look for options that we can present to you that would not necessarily be as costly as a salary increase, but might still be a way of incenting people and recognizing performance. So I still think we need to be perhaps a little bit more creative with that.
Well, I'd like to actually offer you a suggestion.
Sure.
It's something that I brought up previously as part of our work plan discussions, but we've got a lot of folks here that would like to expand their skill sets and work outside of their comfort zones, be challenged in new and creative ways. I'd like to see us explore the opportunity to, if there is a special project or something that comes along that needs focused attention, research, data analysis, whatever it happens to be, that we have that discussion with our directors to say, hey, would you be open to it, with the city manager as well as our finance director, what would be the financial impact of that? So if you've got somebody working outside of their class and comp level, I see that it's addressed in the study that there are some compensation options, but I want to make sure that we address it from, let's expand your skill set, let's give you opportunities to stretch yourself, so that even if you decide to stay here, you've got some new and creative things that now you can offer the city as well as your own department. So that would be one thing. And then I'm also interested to seeing what your approach is going to be with more research on this tuition reimbursement. And is it something that would be across the board? Is it different for different professions? What are some of the best practices that you've seen in other municipalities? How would that integrate here? How long would it take? What would the cost be? What would the benefits and disadvantages be if there are any? So.
Sure. And some of that information is included in the report in terms of the different approaches cities have taken, but there's a lot of different ways that we could slice that and I think still manage costs. And certainly we could propose a variety of things and see what our budget might allow in the future.
Going back to the work skill set expansion, I mean, when this was first offered, I was approached, and would I be willing to sit down with HR? And I said, well, no, not if I don't get support from the top down, and that's as far as it's gone.
Right.
So I would at the very least like to have that discussion be had. Would the directors be open to it? Are there things that they see or that the city manager's office may have that could be an option for us rather than having to hire an outside consultant? Is it something that we have in-house talent that we may have just not known about or have yet untapped that could be used to do those kinds of things? But I would at least like to see that discussion be had rather than just dismiss it as it might be too complicated or too costly.
I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Council, other questions on this study? I think some of us had seen this a couple of times as we sat on the committee that reviewed this, and so I think we had a lot of the questions answered there. I know that I really don't think that I have any other questions. I think the only question I did have, and I think I just make it more of a clarity perspective, is that, again, this is only readjusting for 4 positions. And so it's not, I think people think that this is a mass change, right? And this is a mass slice and cut and add more dollars to the budget, and that's really not what this is about. This is about seeing where we balance and where we fit in market competitiveness. And so this recommendation is only for 4 positions really, and again, increasing the bandwidth for potential top end increases as we merit those over time. And I think that that's important to reiterate. So any other questions, concerns at this time? Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Wade.
Not on your subject matter. I'm fine with that. I did find I got my computer to work properly, so I did find something that I thought was important out of the things that I attended and other areas. One is important is that Global Water, I had been working with Global Water to install an ADA accessible door, and so wanted to let the community know that that door is now accessible and meets ADA standards, so that they can either push to go in, and the door, I believe itself, is a little bit wider to do so.
Councilmember, let me, sorry. So Just by way of info, so we've closed off item 3.3, and what we're doing is we're going back and reopening item 3.2. So I just wanted to make that clear. So I apologize. Go ahead and take it away.
I'm sorry, that's why I said was there. We good? Okay, all right, thank you. But that's the point, is that Global Water actually was approached, I approached them, they were very helpful in moving forward to try to get someone, a contractor to come in and do the work, and then now it is an ADA accessible door. And it's one other item, if you don't mind. Mount Moriah, I was able to attend a function for Mount Moriah AME Church. They celebrated their 10th year anniversary in the city of Maricopa, which is a milestone for a church of their size and magnitude. So just wanted to make sure that that was a record to recognize the efforts of Mount Moriah AME Church. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, with that concludes our work session at this time. Council, we need to go to an E-session, so can I have a motion to move to E-session, please? Is there a motion and a second? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries.